Human beings are problem solvers. Already, we all do it. Some of us, of course, do it better than others, and sometimes in our lives we're better at doing it than we are at other times, or we might be really good in one domain of our life and not so good in another. We all have that in common. The trick is to see if we can find a way of being that allows us to take this part of us that's kind of naturally built in, that solves problems, and get that part of us to do it better. And that's possible. Now, I'm not perfect at this. I really ascribe to the idea that there's no such thing as a grown-up, and I'm not one of them. But I know that when I set my intention right, that I decide that I want to improve at something, I will. So you're here. Something triggered your curiosity about problem solving, about managing yourself such that you could be better at that. And your motivation may be personal, it may be professional, it may be both. I can't really separate the two things very effectively in my life. So what's it look like if you set yourself on a path of getting better at being a problem solver? Well, the first thing that we always have to do is take a look at what we would call the habits that get in the way of being a better person, a better problem solver, a more creative individual. There are certain things that are pretty much across the entire species that we do that are done for a reason. They're not like stupid things that we do, but you could call them stupid human tricks, because some of the things that are adaptive in certain circumstances and will help us out are maladaptive in other circumstances. And when it comes to problem solving, when it comes to being more creative, when it comes to constantly being a growing up, there are habits that get in the way. So we're going to explore those habits and see if we can get better at noticing them when they come up and then setting them aside, getting them out of the way. Now, what do I mean by habits? Well, I'm going to give you some sense of that just from a physical point of view so that you get a feel for what we mean by a habit, but then we'll talk about it specifically with respect to our creativity, our problem-solving ability, and our desire to maintain our energy to be growing ups, those three things. But let's try something. If you would, I would like you to take your hand and clasp it together, just naturally, and then just notice which thumb is on the top and the bottom. Now, I don't want you to just do this. I want you to reclasp your entire hand so that the other thumb is on the top and all the fingers are reclasped. Now, this is not my natural way of clasping my hand. It feels a little awkward, and it might for you too. It's just, marginally less comfortable. It's not debilitating. It's not something I couldn't make myself do if I wanted to. It's just marginally less comfortable. And if you were to say, hey, Bob, clasp your hands, in the future, I probably would fall back to my default. All of us have these patterns. This one's not related to handedness. And in fact, I'm kind of teasing because it doesn't feel so uncomfortable to me to do it the other way anymore. Used to. I still know what my default was. But the more I've clasped my hand the other way, the easier it is and the more comfortable it becomes. Now, this is not a masterclass focused on hand clasping. This is a masterclass focused on problem solving. And in order to solve problems more effectively, we have to be willing to try on some new habits, something a little more sophisticated than clasping your hand in one way or the other, something a little more sophisticated than crossing your arms and then recrossing them another way. And it's going to primarily be about how we think at first, and then how we behave when we're interacting collaboratively with other people. So this first step is to remove habits that get in the way of our creative thinking. And what might those habits be? What might be the common human habits? Well, the first one is this, that we have a tendency to excuse our own behavior by finding someone whose behavior in that domain, that dimension, is worse than ours. Years ago in my life, I ran drug abuse programs and I treated drug abusers. And almost every one of them could find someone who was worse than them at whatever their addictive pattern was. So if they're alcoholic, they would say, well, at least I don't do drugs, And then if they do drugs, they'd say, well, at least I don't do hard drugs. I only smoke marijuana, And then if they did hard drugs, they would say, well, I've never injected. And if they injected, they might say, I never sold my body to make money to feed my drug habit. It seems that we have this ability to constantly find another person worse than us to excuse our habits. Let's stop that. The meta habit, excusing ourselves. Let's stop that for a while. Let's be growing ups. And let's get together and see what we can do to find the habits that impede our creativity and our creative collaboration.